Welcome to another Android Studio tutorial. My name is Hanis. Today I would like to talk about very basic Android programming. Alright, so whenever you create new Android project, you will be given with the following two files: activity_main.xml and main.activity.java. So both are related to each other because activity main is basically where your layout is going to be, and your main activity.java is where your Java or event programming is going to be. Okay, so the first thing in any Android programming, you are going to start with the interface. You need to design your interface, and then you need to put, or you need to translate your interface into your program. And by default, we're going to start with the activity main.xml and the default, what we call as view here, the overall view of your activity is going to be constraint layout. So for constraint layout is basically your component placed inside this constraint layout will be constrained to the layout itself. So for example, this text view. So for this text view to work, you need to anchor your component relative to the layout using this constraint. Okay, there are four constraints: above, below, left, and right. So you need to constrain each of these components to where it is supposed to be. So if you like to be there, so you need to arrange that in that particular location. You need to make sure that the constraint is properly set. However, this is my personal liking. I like my interface in a linear layout. To me, I found out that linear layout is much easier to control compared to the constraint layout or relative layout. It's just me, but I would suggest for you to try constraint layout for your application. But I'm having problem with constraint layout where if you have quite a number of components in your application, your layout start to behave quite strange. Maybe this is just me, so I like to change my layout to the linear layout, and then you can see now the main, or what we call as a parent layout, is a linear layout type. So you can change either in horizontal or vertical. That depends on how you lay out your component. So if you place as a vertical, you can see that your component laid out in a vertical order. Or if you put it as a horizontal, your layout is going to be as a horizontal order to the right. Alright, so I'm going to start with this basic layout, vertical layout. Alright, so let's say you want to start with the basic. So with the basic programming, how you can use all the component that is available can be very easy to use. So we start with the text view here. So if I would like to take this text view, just drag into the linear layout inside the component tree, and there you go. You get your text view in your layout. You can also drag to the interface design here, but I like to drag inside this component tree. Alright, so by default, this is the view. You can change actually the how the preview of your application using this drop down box here. You can change how the view on a much smaller device, 3.7 inch Nexus 1, 4 inch devices, 5 inch devices, or even 7 inch devices. So you can properly test how your layout is going to be on a different screen sizes. So let's say by default I'm going to put 5-inch screen sizes, and this is basically how my application is going to look like. So if you like to change the properties of your text view, you can just select on the text view here and then change the properties. The default property, the basic properties can be pressed using this arrow key, left and right key, and you can change all the properties available here, such as ID. So this is unique ID. You cannot make it, you cannot have one component or multiple components with the same ID. You need to make sure that the ID is unique. The width, normally by default, it set the width of the component here, text view 2, match parent, so it will match to the linear layout parent. Layout here, normally it's set to wrap content, so wrap content to the size of the text, so the default size is 14. The content of the text file is text view, so if you like to change to a different text, hello world. If you like to change in terms of the text size, you can increase the size. Let's say you want to set to 30. So it changed to a different size. You want to change the font type, a number of, or even you can add some other font that if you like to. You can also change the text style, bold, italic, and also caps, all caps. So that depends on the way that you set the text view. If you like to have more control, you can press this arrow button again. There's literally hundreds of options that you can use. So let's say by default is this. So if you run this on your EVD, let's say I would like to run this on Pixel. Right, so for the first time you're running this application, it may take time, but after your first compile, it gets faster to rerun the application. So as you can see now, the application successfully installed here, and it basically reflects how the design or the placement of the component here. And of course, nothing fancy. It just stated hello world. And you can further, if you like to have your hello world not to be to the left, you can change, for example, the gravity of your layout of the component itself. You can set the gravity to the center. You'd like to have your text to the center of the component itself, so you can further set that anywhere that you like for the layout to be. Right, so the second time you run here, it's going to be faster. For the Gradle to compile, to build, and then compile and installing the APK. Done. Right in the center. Alright, so you can further put that in your application. Alright, so now how do we start doing programming? So to start doing programming, we need to go to the main activity.java. So inside this main activity.java, you can see there's a on create method. So this method is what we call as an override method, and it function the same like public static void main in your standard Java programming. Alright, so Android programming is based on Java. So the programming style will always be Java programming. The syntax and everything must follow Java programming standard. So for this, what I'm going to do is that I want to change the text or the content of this text view programmatically. So which means that I need to do this inside onCreate method. So for onCreate method to work, you need to do the following command. You need to use the following command to interact with the text view here. And the ID is very important, text view 2. So if you like to use that, you need to define the class that we're going to use, which is text view. The object name, you can give it any name, let's say tv2 equal the method that we're going to use, which is find view by ID, and the ID of the component that we like to use. So this is basically, you can see there, text view 2 automatically appear in the code. So this is the first thing for every component that you like to use, you need to set the object reference. Okay, so the object here type text view, and then it refers to the text view 2, which means that now I can use text view 2 in my programming. So text view 2 now represent text view 2. tv2 object represent text view 2. So to use text view 2, you can use all the methods available through the object tv2. So there's a lot of method available that you can use here. And the common use method for text view is set text. You want to set the text to certain value, to a certain variable, right? So we're going to use set text, and we are submitting string. So welcome to Android. You need to close this. Remember, close this with semicolon. This is Java programming, so you need to close with semicolon. So with this, you can now run the program, and it will basically change from the default, which is hello world, and through the use of programming, we change the content to the welcome to Android, no longer hello world, that's set by default to through the layout. Okay, so the content now, since the Android programming execute the onCreate method, it's set to the new text, which is welcome to Android. Alright, so of course there's nothing fancy here, that's just a simple programming. So what I would like to do next is, because mobile programming or Android programming is an event-based programming, so we're going to add another component, which is a button, that when we press on that button, we can change the behavior, we can change the content of the text view above. Alright, so we're going to go back to our activity main.xml, and we are going to place a button inside our layout here. Okay, now we have a button. So this button is called by default text button. So you can change this to press me. The ID of this button is button 2, very important. If you like to see details, you can just change back to the simple view. Alright, so to use button means that I would like when I press this button and I'm going to change the content of this text. So to do that, there are two ways. Either you can use the view method, or you can use the listener based method. Alright, so there are two ways of doing this, either by using view method, public view method, or you can also use the listener. So I'm going to show both method or both way of doing this, how to interact with button or any other component. So we're going to start with the simple one, which is by using a view method. So to use a view method, simply declare your user defined method, public void. Let's say we give it a method name, set new text. So what we're going to do inside here, we're going to set our TV2 with a new text. But before we can do that, we need to set our text view part of the class object. Okay, so we set our text view as a part of a class object so that this text view can be accessible anywhere. So the only thing that we need to do is just create a new method with passing view. Yes, so we need to pass view with view object using through this method, public void set new text. And since we already defined the text view up here, all you need to do is tv2.set text with a new text. Let's say happy coding. Happy coding. That's it. And before that, before you're running this example, you need to select on the button itself. You need to go to a simple view, much easier to find. This is a simple view for the button. Look for the on-click option here and select the method that we have set, the view method that we have set in the programming, which is set new text. Save. Don't forget to save. Always save your project. Press Ctrl S. Make it as a habit, and then you can run the program. Alright, so by default, welcome to Android. When you first run the application, welcome to Android. So when you press the button here, it changed to happy coding. Alright, so you can see how easy it is. You can have this method running up and running very short time. And this is the first way of interacting with your button using view method. Very simple to do, and basically if that's what you need, you can just use the view method. Okay, so declare as a public void the method name, and you need to pass view object, and inside here do whatever that you need to do, but make sure that your object has been declared as a global or as a public inside this class so that it can be accessible. Alright, so that is basically the first way. The second way of interacting with your button is just by using a listener, a button listener. So for this to work, I'm going to remove this. I'm going to add one button declaration. Okay, you can declare your button here, btn, give it btn2 object name. Make sure to import this. Okay, when it turns red, means that it's missing the import section, and then import class. Just alternate enter, and then you get the button imported. The next thing that you need to do is you need to define the object, the reference to the object. So we are using button2, btn2 equal find view by id r.id.button2. Okay, now we have now the reference, the object reference to the button2. What we need to do to the button2 is that we need to add what we call listener to the button. Okay, so that the button will listen to any, or we register the button to the on-click listener. So what we need to do now, btn2 dot set on click listener. Okay, we need to use the set on click listener, and inside this listener we need to implement the listener new on click listener. Just press enter, you can see the magic here. View on click listener, press enter. It will automatically create or inserted the code for the on click operation. So you can see here the method that you can use. Another override method built in for the on click listener. So in this case, if you like to have tv2 dot set text happy coding with Android. Alright, so run the project again, press OK. Okay, so the application now running. If you press, forgot to remove before this, you need to remove this. Okay, because I already set this, I need to remove this to none. Okay, don't forget to remove this, or else you might get problem later because it keep on searching for that missing view method. So rerun again. So when you press this button, happy coding with Android. Okay, so that is the second way of interacting with the button or any other component in Android. Basically the same. So btn2.set on click listener. The best thing about implementing this listener is that you can add some additional listener. So by using just view method, there's only one operation that you can perform, but with this with the listener way, you can actually do the following: btn2 that set on long click listener. There's another listener that can be implemented, new on long click listener. So inside here you can implement another one, so it means that one button can perform two separate operation. Thanks for joining Android team. So this one you need to return true, or else it's going to execute two coding at the same time. So now we have button 2 running two operation at the same time. Okay, so if you press once, Happy coding with Android. It basically execute the on click method. If you long click, now you can see the second listener is being executed. Thanks for joining Android team. So you press 1, you get this. If you long press, you get this. So that is basically the advantages of using listener. So I would like you, if possible, use the on-click listener or use the listener in handling event in Android. So it is very simple to do, and it can actually perform some other task instead of just having one button doing one job at a time. You can have one button to perform one component to perform multiple jobs. Remember, mobile application, they are quite limited in terms of the screen size. So the screen real estate is very, very important. If you can have one component to execute multiple operations at the same time, by all means use it. Okay, so you can reduce the amount, reduce the clutter on your interface. Alright, the next thing that I would like to show is how to handle number. How to handle number input by using your Android Studio. So to handle number or input by user, or even input, so before that, just a raw input, how to handle input from user. So to handle input, you can use plain text. Okay, so you can use plain text, or if you drag into your program here, you can see the component ID names is edit text. Okay, so the component edit text, so you can use this as your input. So the ID here is edit text. The component here is edit text. The default text here is name. If you use name, there are quite a number of text input here. You can see password, password numeric, email, phone, multi-line, time, date, number, and so on and so forth. So all those input is very keyboard dependent. Okay, for example, if you use plain text here, the keyboard is going to show a full-size keyboard, a virtual keyboard. If you use number only, it will show number keyboard. So it depends on the type where you can choose from the input type here. So let's just use the default one. Okay, so text person name, the input type means that you can input text, any text. And I would like to have another button down here. So now we have button 3. So for this button, I would like this button to function. When I click this, it will take input from user here and show it back maybe up here, right? So that is basically the idea. So what we're going to do now, we're going to change, press here too. And I'm going to go back to the programming. I'm going to add additional component, which is called edit text. So we give it edt1, the object name. And we have second button here. So we just add one more button, button 3. And you need to make reference for each component that you use inside. So let me add the component button. We start with the button 3. So find view by ID, button 3, reference for button 3, and then we have another one, edit text. So you need to define this as an edit text, edt1, find view by ID, r.id, edit text. Okay, remember the unique ID of that component. Now you can use all the button and edit text. Alright, so since I'm going to use the button 3, so button 3 dot set on click listener, new on click listener. So what I'm going to do is just set tv2 dot set text welcome, but I would like to get input from user. So before that, I need to take the input first. So the input here is going to be defined as string input equal edt1 dot get text. Okay, because you want to get text from user to string. Okay, now we have input where the value from user is being stored into input. So welcome to welcome input. Right, so inside this button 3, get the input from user and then set the text to welcome with the whatever that user input inside the text view. Right, should be more than enough now. So let's try to run this program and see the result. Okay, now we have this input now. So let's say Hanis. So if I press here, welcome Hanis, or you can change to others, John. Press here, welcome John. As simple as that. It's very, very simple programming. Now you just build yourself a simple application that shows how to use input. Okay, so button 3, you can see now the programming, the way that Android program. So if you use any component define in your layout, you need to define first what are the component object name, and then you need to make reference which object refers to which ID, and then you can use the object according to its function. For text view, you can use to set text. For edit text, you can use get text. Okay, it's very, very simple to use. Okay, so I've shown you how to use the, let me just delete the content here. Well, you can use hint for your edit text. Hint, please enter text. Okay, so rerun this again. You can see now the text is filled with hint. Hint means that you don't have to delete that text. Okay, you can just simply type in. All right. Okay, so the next step is the next phase that I'm going to show is how to handle number. All right, so to do that, I'm going to use two additional tags here. Let's say I'm going to take a number with decimal. Okay, so I'm going to add two edit text down here. Okay, so there's a 1 and 2. This is edit text 2. This is edit text 3. And then I'm going to have one button again, another button down here. And this button perform basic operation. Let's say multiply. right? So I'm going to take this number and perform multiplication and show the result up here. Why not? So there are additional 3 components I need to define. Remember, always save your project. So I'm going to add more. So we have text view. No need. There's only one text view that we use. We have one additional button here, which is button 3. Sorry, button 4. And we have 2 additional edit tags. So we give it ADT2 and ADT3. And again, there are 3 additional components that we define here. So btn4, you can see that the component has not been yet used as it turned gray. So btn4 equal find view by id r.id button 4. So we have additional button there. And then we have adt2 find view by id r.id edit text 2, and adt3 find view by id find view by id r.id edit text 3. Okay, so very simple. Now we have all the component defined, all turned to not blue, I think it's purple. Means that we have properly defined all the component. And we have additional button now, btn4 dot set on click listener new on click listener, and we need to get 2 input. Okay, so the 2 input that we get from adt2 and adt3. Okay, so to get the input, you can use the following. This is basically quite shortcut, but so the number is a double type, so we need to define this as you can use float num a equal float dot parse float, and you need to get the value from input. So the value from input is adt2 dot get text dot to string. Okay, so this is a shortcut basically, because we just want to get the value straight away. So the second value we get from adt3, which is number b. So we'll perform the operation float result equal num a times num b, and finally we show back the result on tv2, set text result plus result. That's it. Okay, so now you can see there's 2 input here, and you can see this is keyboard input number only. So let's enter 2 and 5. Okay, so when we press multiply, result 10.0 because we set our number type is a float. Alright, so now you can see how simple it is to operate on number. So what I did here is define 2 variables, use float class and parse float method to convert string value to the float. Okay, so the value that we get is from adt2 and also adt3. So once we get these 2 variables, we can perform the operation, which is result num a times num b. And finally, we set the result to set text result. Thus, when we press the button here, 30. But be careful, if you didn't enter any value, the float here try to convert this into a null into number, null into float, which is going to get error. So if you press this, you're going to get application has stopped. So this is usually happen. Either you define an object but you didn't make reference to the object and the object is missing, or you define the object but here it need the input to be string, however it didn't get that string value. It didn't get that value and unable to convert that into value. So you might need to add some error checking here before you can use ADT2. Either you can check first the value, if the value exists or not. If the string value exists or not, then perform the operation. If the value is not it's not valuable, it's null, don't perform the operation. So that is basically logic that you need to implement to make sure that user input correctly. Right. So I believe I covered everything. Basic Android programming, how to write Android codes using Java, and how to interact with the interface and using the linear layout as your main interface here, and how to place the component inside linear layout. And one more thing I would like to show is that you can also use linear layout, sub layout, and you can also place your component to the right, something like this. So if I like to have my button to the right, so I can just add more button to the right. Okay, so you can have these 3 buttons aligned in this position. So that does for linear layout, because linear layout for me is stable enough in terms of the position of the component. However, it may take time for you to arrange the component individually to make it where it's supposed to be. Okay, you need to play with the maybe with the value of the margin, or in terms of the weak sum. Okay, so you might need to play with that to place that component exactly where you want it to be. Alright, so with that, I believe it should be more than enough for you to start with basic Android programming. So here I listed again. You can pause this anytime. Here and here, the full code down here. Alright, so that is all for the layout. Again, this is how the layout look like. This is how my component, so down here it's not supposed to be there, so just delete that. This is all the component tree available for this example to work. Alright, so with that, happy coding and see you next time.